we all should be, as we head into Thanksgiving, giving thanks for everything that's taken place here at DV over the last 50 days. Need to thank our students for being patient with us. Certainly the parents who are supporting their students in every aspect, and our wonderful teachers for coming to school every day and doing their best. Our janitors and custodians who are doing an amazing job. Our administration, led by Dr. Bell and his wonderful staff, who create a culture here of what we can do every single day. So we appreciate that. And as you sit down next week at the Thanksgiving table, give thanks that you get to live in America, where no matter what your party affiliation, you get to live in the greatest country in the history of the world. And that's a pretty amazing thing. So with those words, I do want to let you know we have a number of different topics to discuss over the next 53 minutes. If you have questions, raise your hands. If you have your phones on, put them on stun so we are not disturbed. And if you have questions, if you are in the public and you're watching it on YouTube, please direct your questions to our president at schoolboard@dvsd.org. And we will answer every question that is posed either here in public or over the YouTube network. So with that, I will turn over to Dr. Bell how we are communicating with folks tonight.
Okay, thank you. First thing is that we won't need these microphones because these are just to feed the public. They only work to these speakers that if we had a big crowd, they would need to hear us in the back. But there's literally 3 people here and they're all employees, that won't be necessary. So you don't need those. Secondly, we've set up a Zoom call for the board members who are not here.
John, your mute is on and we can't hear you.
Somebody at home. Brian.
Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
can
I see John's mute is on,
Oh.
and I could not hear John speak.
Okay, so then we will mute.
That's
and
better.
unmute, even though it really hurts our conversation around this board, unfortunately. We will do it for the sake of the people that can't make it tonight. So you don't need the microphones on the side. The community is still on YouTube, and they're picked up by the microphone in the middle of the room. And then we'll use Zoom just for all of us. And that'll work, okay? All right, the first thing is available lunch space. We looked into that. And actually I have some good news. There's more space than I thought when we analyzed. Because one of the things that I didn't take into consideration is that there's always people absent every day too, which creates a little wiggle room from day to day. So in the chart, you'll see there's charts there for the 4 elementary schools and for the 3 secondary schools. You know, DVS, you'll see there's still room for more kids in their total capacity to their largest class. Their largest class is still grade 119, their total 137, capacity of 18. DVES has still 15 extra seats compared to its largest class. Shahola has 37 extra seats compared to its largest class. And I think the primary, I can't even try to figure that out because they change every so many minutes. There's another change, but needless to say, there's room down there. So that was the same.
Roundabout?
What was that?
Is there a roundabout?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You can figure it out. You let me know. I tried about 6 times to figure out how to measure it, but every so many minutes it changes groups, but there's room.
Okay, thank you.
Dingman's Middle School is actually one of the tightest ones. The rooms that they use currently, Dingman's Middle School has an excess capacity of 14 seats. compared to their largest class. DD Middle School has added some more rooms, as they used to have outdoor seating. Well, they do have outdoor seating, but it's getting too cold to use it. So they had to come back in, so they've added some more spaces inside. You'll see that, A19, E6, and E8 are classrooms that they're using. So now they're in pretty good shape. They have excess capacity of 56. And then the high school, you'll see their largest is the A lunch with a total of 353. When we had outside seating, the total capacity was 471. Without the outside seating in the wintertime, total capacity drops to 423. So that gives us a net of about 80. And you'll see, ironically, on the day they did this count, 83 kids were absent. So you're going to have kids absent every day, so it's going to give you some wiggle room. So we're not in a bad position. I mean, one of the biggest drawbacks on the elementary level right now is that basically we've stolen all the IAs out of the classrooms from about 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, because all these extra small spaces that we've created, that extra rooms, the IAs have to supervise them. So we've lost instructional time for them. So that's the drawback. But it's doable. We've got the bodies to do it. It's just, that's the academic drawback, And then at a place like the high school, which has, 1,500 kids or 1,100 kids present there, you'll see that in addition to the 2 cafeterias, we've taken the gym away, the older gym right down the hall, what they call the freshman gym. It's the old high school gym. That's out of commission all day long, so we use that for all the gym classes, and we use it as a gym space for basketball after school. They use this pit area, and they use the stage. The library and the media center are not accessible during 5A, 5B, and 5C for academic usage. So these are the drawbacks of having to have all these auxiliary locations, but it's doable, and we figured out a way to make it happen. It's not the ideal, but nothing is during the pandemic. So, all right. Any questions about that cafeteria information? Yeah, sure. Thanks to the APs and principals for running around with clipboards and counting heads and counting seats and everything. So we appreciate
this includes the additional 110 we brought in into the first semester.
Yeah.
We still have room for another 80.
Yes, if we have room for 80 more, if we have 80 absent. If you count everybody.
80 plus 80.
No, if you count it, if all those people were here, we'd be just about perfect. Yeah. So absences, which you have more in the winter than you do in the fall and spring, gives you a little wiggle room, which is good because we need wiggle room when it gets too cold to go outside. So it's funny how it ebbs and flows and works out. The next document in your folder is the elementary class sizes, where they stand now that we're in the second market period. The first page is Big Medela Primary, the second page is Big Medela Elementary. The third page should actually say Shahola Elementary. Rosemary just caught that for me. That should say Shahola, and then the fourth page is EVES. I'll give you a chance to look at that. If there's any questions, I can lean on Becky to answer.
Do our folks at home have these documents?
No. I can provide a summary if you want verbally, just to help people.
I think the board members have it.
Yes. Okay. Oh, you meant the board members.
The board members.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Since nobody answered us tonight to tell us if they were coming or Zooming, we had Julie make copies and send them out.
That commissioner did tell me he would be.
He did? Today? Or the first
The other
time?
day.
Ah, you get an old star. Tell your son you're getting more old stars than he did. So the primary school, you'll see pre-K is averaging 17. Kindergarten runs the gamut at 19, a couple 19s, a couple 20s, and 18. There's 122. And then first grade, 21, 22, and 23, and then the Zoomers are less. Second grade, 21, 22, 23.
Are those Zoom classes that you do or didn't go because some kids have come back? Since September?
Okay, any questions, right?
The number of Zoomers at Dingdale Primary, is that because several of them have come back since September? I don't remember the Zoom class being that small before.
They did have some come back and then they moved some kids around. We actually had, we had 3 Zoom in second grade.
Okay.
And that was a lower number because that was the third one that was added on. So we were able to, between kids coming back and kind of shuffling them around a little bit, we were able to make that, put that person back in reading.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Johnny, moving on to Delaware Valley, Delaware.
Yeah, Dingdale Elementary School, third grade, they all vary between 20, 21, and 22, and the Zoom has 18. One of the Zooms has 18, one has 21. And they're both combo classes now, because kids have been coming back. So you'll see both that used to be Zoom are now combo. Danny Blum's class is now 11 Zoom and 10 in person, and Lisa Despoto's is now 14 Zoom and 4 in person. So they're starting to migrate back. Fourth grade, we go from with the in-person, they're all 20 and 21. That group actually, fourth grade actually has 3 Zoom classes. One of them is 15 kids Zooming.
And she's only Zoom. She's not hybrid. She's
Right.
just-
So the first class is 15 kids Zooming. The second class, Jolene Lentowski is 19. It's a total of 15 Zoom, and 4 of her kids came back. And Christine Cuttenberg, she has 19. She had 17 Zoomers, 2 of them came back. And then in 5th grade, you'll see the in-persons are 19, 20, and 21 kids per class. And then in Michelle DePillo has 25 on Zoom, and Melinda Little has 22 on Zoom and 2 in person. I actually got around the other day and said hello to all the teachers that needed it, yeah, so they don't have to look like it. One kid said I had a face for radio.
My only thing is the 2 groups that have only 2 kids in class and the rest of them are Zooming. Is that working out for them? I mean, I would just think there was only 2 kids.
As I told you last time, they were here request not to move to a
Okay.
different teacher. And at this point, it does because people are all in different places.
Okay.
And I think for the kids for consistency for instruction, we're heading toward probably more and more people being hybrid at elementary just because we don't want to, start moving, plopping them into other groups,
And then 3 weeks from now, plopping them someplace else.
Several of them were, yes, parents
Okay.
that did not want to change teachers.
Okay,
So.
okay, I can't imagine just 2 kids sitting in a classroom. That's all.
I guess they're okay with it, but yeah, they are. Seems to be working.
Okay,
So we should-
well, if it's working, don't mess with it, right?
No, that's what I said. And I said at this point, for consistency of same teacher, even if the kids aren't with them, it's the same kids, that they see in Zoom and they're at the same place.
How do
where
they
were
do specials? Do they go
So-
with an in-class for specials, or do they just Zoom for specials?
No, they usually team up with another.
Okay.
Well, actually, the only place they may not even be doing that. Because our music, they come into the room and Zoom, so the kids are there.
Okay,
Phys ed, they may join with another class, so they can go outside because the phys ed teachers are kind of doing like
okay. They're
calisthenics.
trying
over
to do
Zoom
what
with
they
them.
can. Okay, thank you.
But that's always an option.
Okay.
So page 3 is actually Shahola.
Yes, my apologies, I kept redoing these charts, so.
You'll see Shahola kindergarten, in-persons are all 16 and 17, and the Zoom is 10. First grade, the in-persons are both 22, the Zoom is 13. Second grade, the in-persons are 20 and 22, and then there's a hybrid class with 11 kids total, 7 Zoom and 4 in person. Third grade, the in-persons are 18, 19, and 19, and the Zoom is 21. In fourth grade, the in-persons are 20 and 23, and the hybrid is 18, with 11 in-person and 7 Zoom. And then in 5th grade, the in-persons are 19, 19, and 22, and 17 Zoom.
And that's The combo, SES and DBES, so her 4 in person came back from Shahola, and she's got 7 Shahola Zoomers and 9, it's 9 and 7. So she's actually got, more than that, you have to add an extra page here as well.
So she's got 20.
She's the combo kids. So she's got 9 plus, right,
Yeah.
yep. So she's got a total of 20.
16 Zoomers plus 4 in person.
Yeah. for total.
Correct.
Thank you.
The last page is Delaware Valley Elementary School, kindergarten, in-person, 17, with 18 in the hybrid class. Of the 18, there's 12 Zoomers and 6 in person. First grade is 19 and 20 in person, and then there's 12 in the hybrid. That's 8 Zoom and 4 in person. Second grade, it's 19, 18, and 18. And then there are 9 BBES second graders that Zoom with the Shahola teacher, for a total of 20 in that class at Shahola. Third grade in person is 20, 20, and 22 with 16 on Zoom. Fourth grade in person is 17, 18, 18 with 17 in Zoom. Fifth grade is 19, 21, 18 with 18 hybrid in the fifth grade. It's 14 Zoom and 4 came back and are in person. So it gives you a little much better idea of what they look like. Certainly the classes are nice sizes, which allows the kids to spread out, which then in turn helps mitigate any issues to help reduce the number of kids that might have to be quarantined if something happens. Number 4 is discussion about a change in instructional models.
I have a question, John.
Yeah, sure.
Vicky, have we seen any differences in the testing scores, whether kids are Zooming or in class? Does everyone maintain the averages?
Well, we did look at, John, I think somebody actually, John actually looked at like failing rates from first quarter this year, last year. And it was pretty much the same number of kids by building 1 or 2 here or there. So not from a failing standpoint, from a regular testing standpoint, it's just, I think it's just a little bit harder, you know. I know teachers have told me that they told parents, okay, I know you sit there, so when we're testing, I want you to sit behind your child because you can't help them. A lot of grandmas that love them, that want to help and think they're doing the right thing. So, you know, they've told them same thing, like, grandma, you can't help, you need to. So I think the struggle is not so much getting the testing done, but having help. So, I mean, they found a lot of creative ways, like, so that was one teacher that told me, she tells them, you need to sit behind you so I can see you, because you can't help them. So, hopefully, little by little, all of the kinks that we've been trying to work out are getting there, you know, the little challenges, like, things like that. And again, people feel like they're doing, you know, oh, I want to help, but they don't realize, you know, that that's not really helping them, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dylan let me know he fixed the sound so we can stay muted if we want, and they should hear us from home. He fixed the mic, so you won't have to worry about clicking on and off all the time. Discussion about change in instructional model. Evidently, I didn't know it, but there were all kinds of rumors flying all around the community that we were either going to be virtual for the 3 days next week, or we were going to be virtual the week after, or there was another rumor, I think we were virtual all the way until 21, all kinds of stuff. And I just wanted to reiterate to everybody that, you know, our plan is to stay 5 days a week for as long as we can. You know, we track the data every day. We work on the idea that we take it 1 week at a time, and as long as things are good, we progress to the next week. We keep chugging and chugging and chugging. So nobody has to worry about that right now. All they have to do is just worry about making sure the kids do their homework and wash their ears. We're going to keep going full speed ahead. So any of those rumors you heard about us being hybrid or virtual, none of that has any validity to it. That's just simply rumors around the community. I mean, we are certainly watching the numbers, and we've moved from low to moderate, we moved back to low, and then we moved back to moderate. So we fluctuated around. One of the things the state has said is that they say don't take any quick action. You know, watch for trends, because things can move up and down. We've seen that already. We've moved up, we've moved down, we moved back up. So certainly our numbers are going up, the numbers are going up everywhere. But we're not in a position where we have to pivot and move to a different kind of instructional model. We've talked before, and the board has given me authority that if we have to do any short-term stuff, because something will pop up where we might have a large number of people needing to be quarantined, or a large number of teachers get knocked out of commission because of quarantine, we might have to put a school on remote for a while, but that wouldn't be a district-wide thing. So, there's a million different scenarios out there. We plan for all of them. It's like the Army planner for the Cold War. You have to be ready for every scenario, but 99 of them probably would never happen. And we've been doing that since March. So we continue to do that kind of planning with our senior leadership. And we talked about it with our principals yesterday too, about all the different things. We are going to have the elementary kids take their Chromebooks home with them for Thanksgiving, because we're going to be off for almost a week and you don't know what might transpire. So it's always safer to have them put them in their book bags and take them home, and then just bring them back the following Tuesday. That's easier than if something were to happen that we didn't foresee, or the governor dictated something, and then we'd have to have all those Chromebook distribution things again and all that. And we've got all the Chromebooks assigned to the individual kids. They're in their classrooms, they have a post-it on it with their name on it. So they always use the same Chromebook every day in class, so that we're not mixing germs on other kids. You keep your germs on your own Chromebook, that keeps life simpler. But yeah, for Thanksgiving, we said, is it Tuesday that we're going to send them?
Yeah, there's a letter going home tomorrow to explain it all, but we're gonna send them home Tuesday. We figured half a day, people will be in for conferences, and then we'll get them home.
And then that way, if should anything happen that's unforeseen, we'd be prepared. And if nothing happens, then great, they just run it back on Tuesday morning. So it's just a little preventative care, just to play it safe. But just again, just to reiterate, we have no plans right now to change the instructional model. We can fluctuate between low and moderate, and we can continue to press on. If we start moving substantial and stay in there for a while, then we may have to look at alternatives. Again, we brainstorm for those, we plan for those, but there's no sense everybody worrying about it right now. We've got plans in place if we need them, but we don't need them right now, thankfully. Any questions about all that, and all the rumors that you've been hearing and everything?
I would just ask that you repeat that at the regular.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great idea. Discussion about temporary space. We talked about modulars and things of that nature. We looked into it. We had Bill ask the business managers if any other districts in the IU or in the area were looking at it. Nobody else is looking at it. And then I thought about it with planning board, zoning board, and all that stuff. We'll probably have a vaccine faster than you could put modulars. So especially with the good news about the two of the vaccines. That's both the Moderna and the Pfizer are both good news. So the combination of how long it would take to actually get some modulars, where would you find teachers, where would you find the money for both, and the good news about the vaccine, and the good news about cafeteria seating. It's really, we don't really need to have conversations about temporary space. We really don't need it. We can survive. Even if more kids come back, we've got the wiggle room to make it happen. And then if things got worse and we had to go hybrid, then it would be a moot point. Because instead of 70% of kids being here every day, it'd be 35%, So even if we went in that direction, it would solve itself too. So we're in a good place space-wise. Which brings us, we only have one meeting next month, so we only have one recon meeting if you guys want one. And then I just want to know if we could just poll what things would you, or if you don't have an answer tonight, you can think about it. But what things would you like us to tackle on December 10th meeting? We got a couple weeks. So if you don't have ideas right now, you can send us ideas. But we'll need some topics for that.
I do have a question about, you mentioned if we went to a full hybrid model, what would that take for us to make that call? Because I know we were hoping to get everyone back into school, but what type of outbreak do we take? Is it the governor who's going to make that decision? Is it the board that's going to make that decision?
It could be one of three things. It could be the governor dictating it. It could be the board deciding that it could be, we're going to go hybrid until further notice. Or it could be something happening and I would do a short term where I say we're going to be hybrid for a week or we're hybrid for 2 weeks. And then if everything's set, then go back. You know, so it could be a combination of any of those.
But tip of my brain, I still need something like
If we had an issue where lots of staff have to be quarantined and we can't cover. That happened over in Orange County, Goshen, one or two of their schools. They had so many staff needed to be quarantined, they didn't have enough subs. So they went virtual for 2 weeks until the quarantine period was over. That's one of our biggest concerns is if you get caught short-handed with staff. You know, the kids, if they have to be quarantined, they just go home and they're on Zoom and there's that mechanism, but the teacher issue is another one. So that's an example. Or another example is if we go to substantial, if our numbers go crazy, if our numbers double, and we go to substantial, and there's no sign of us ever coming out of substantial. Remember the recommendations from the government was, if you're in low, you can be in 5 days or higher. If you go to moderate, you can be 5 days is not supposed to be an option, it's supposed to be hybrid or online. And if you're in substantial, the only option that they're going to do is online. So if we get into substantial and can't get out of it, we'd be hard pressed to stay 5 days a week because we don't have 6 foot social distancing. So we'd be violating a lot of the norms that the health experts recommend. So hopefully we can stay out of that.
Right, but we also have to follow how this continues to change because those recommendations, and as recently as last week, Dr. Levin was asked specifically, I think I mentioned it last week, about shutting down schools. And she said that that's definitely a local district decision. They have guidance, but that does not determine what the local district does. Just today, our governor kind of made a 180 in conjunction with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Tom Wolf, John Carney, Phil Murphy, all the local Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and they're saying that medical research, as well as the data from northeastern states, from across the country, and from around the world, make clear that in-person learning is safe when the appropriate protections are in place, even if communities with high transmission rates. So they're saying in-school is safe. They go on to talk about the dangers of the kids being home and the mental health and the suicide and all of those other things that are at risk when kids are at home, not to mention, you know, one of the things we talked about originally with the hybrid was you've got the kids who are in school because mom and dad are working for most of them. They need to be here. So if they go to a hybrid model, just for whatever reason, now you've got kids that are home alone 2 or 3 days a week without the supervision. And we could get into a whole discussion on that, but I just want to again caution, there's nothing telling us we have to go hybrid. And as long as we're not having in-school spread, I think what John said, if we have teachers who have to quarantine to a point that we can't operate a school, that school closes down for 2 weeks till that quarantine is over and they can come back. And then those children unfortunately have to go all on Zoom for that period. But a change to hybrid is, we don't have to do that because we hit substantial in the county.
Right.
And you got to remember also, as you're tracking the numbers, the county is not our district. So, and that changes, quite frankly, sometimes it's worse in our district, sometimes it's worse outside our district.
Sure.
But it all affects the county numbers.
And in fact, I just retweeted that story about the governors because it's such good news. We all know that in-person learning is the best. You know, tomorrow when we review, I'll share with you the data on the performance for the first quarter comparing 2019 to 2020. And in high school, there are more Fs than there were last year first quarter. And you know, and some of those bubble kids, if they're here and we can get them that extra attention, that F might be a D or a C. But if they're home and they're tuned out, it's hard to get them that extra, they don't have that extra support. And that's one of the trade-offs that parents make when they choose Zoom, is that the kids that do really well in school, if they go on Zoom, they're still going to do really well. It's the kid that's a borderline kid who could use that extra help that maybe is not reaching out to get that extra help, you know, on that. So, but one of the biggest things too is the one thing we always have to be cognizant of that we've thumbed our nose at is the 6 foot social distance. Other states require, it's required. New York State, you cannot open school with more kids than you can 6 foot social distance. We aren't doing that. So while they talk about how great in-school learning is, and we agree absolutely, we are not following one of the most important guidelines that those governors are talking about. So we've owned it, and we've had success with it, but we just have to be cognizant of that's one of the key fundamentals that we're not following. So if things heat up, we have to be cognizant of that.
Rosemary has a comment.
When you refer to substantial, are you referring to in-school or school district students, or are you talking about the entire town?
No, those measures are countywide, and I'll give you those. Last week, the incident rate per 100,000 was at 55.4, and now this week it went up to 76.9. And then the PCR positivity rate went from 6.1% last week to 8.1%. So it's moving in the wrong direction, but it's still in a place that keeps us in moderate, not in substantial. There are 8 counties of the 67 that are not insubstantial. 59 counties are insubstantial, but we're lucky. Us, Wayne, and next door to them, Susquehanna, all 3 of us are not. So that's really good news for us. That's really good news. Substantial is 100. If that incident rate gets to 100, we went from 55 to 76 in 1 week. If you get to 100, that puts you in substantial. And your PCR rate, we went from 6 to 8. If that gets to 10, that puts you in substantial. But again, they also say don't panic if it happens for a week or 2. You know, make sure it's a trend. You know, at a minimum, you want a 14-day pattern before you do anything. So that's why full speed ahead. Yeah, for example, there's 700 in some cases in Pike County, and 403 of them in our zip codes. So there's still another 300 that aren't in our zip codes. You know, we have a little more than half, but it's nowhere near the 700. It's 403 as of this week. So that's good news too. When you back it out, when you take out the southern edge for East Stroudsburg and the western edge for Lompoc.
John, you started to mention before about comparing grades for the first semester now to the first semester last year, which I had asked you if you could do, and if you don't have it all together, that's fine. But you said something about high school Zoomers not doing as well. Did I hear that right?
We have more Fs this first quarter this year than we did last year first quarter. And then when you break it out for in-person Zoomers, it's a higher percentage of Fs with kids Zooming than the kids in person. So I can get that for you tomorrow. We're putting that all together so I can share it and we can review.
And that could be something maybe for the 10th as well.
We don't really have a lot of answers for you because it varies by kid. You know, like I said, if a kid is a really good student, they figure it out no matter what the model or the load is.
Yeah, I think I was really looking for more just averages. Is there an overall setback from the spring that we noticed in the first quarter this year compared to last year? Because they missed that education. But then also, are the kids at home on Zoom, based on averages, doing the same or worse?
And that's a good point, Dawn, because the other factor with kids maybe not doing quite as well, again, the numbers were negligible at the elementary. It's more at the secondary. They're taking individual classes and individual grades every 45 minutes. But some of that could be the loss that happened in the spring too. You know, because the expectation that you should be here in the first quarter, everybody may not be there because of what we went through in the spring. So that's why.
Calling it the COVID slide.
And you got cause and causation. It'd be hard to prove where that comes from in this case because there were multiple things happening to the poor kids in the spring. You know, so they may have a gap coming into the new year that now shows up before the periods. And then you have motivation issues, attention issues, there's a variety of issues when they're not in front of you. You can't keep your thumb up.
You should also see what their GPAs are going into that semester too. You know what I mean? Because on an aggregate, if you get your better achieving students in class, of course they're going to be better. You know what I mean? So I would take a look at that if you're.
Yeah, we also have phenomenal GPAs for Zoom kids too.
Oh, absolutely, but I
Yeah.
mean on aggregate level.
So is it our understanding that if and when we were to get to that scenario of significant, you're going to call an emergency meeting of the board and we're going to make the decision? Or do you as the CEO of this organization get to make that decision on your own? And I'm not looking to downplay your role.
Yeah, no.
I don't know what the procedure is.
No, and actually there is no right answer, because there actually was nothing in policy from Harrisburg that said you guys had to make the call or I had to make the call. They didn't, like most things, they didn't give us guidance. You guys had to approve the health and safety plan in the summer, but you didn't have to approve a format. But you guys chose to do that. So, you know, my thinking is that if we had to do something short term, I could do that. But I don't think based on what you did in August, I don't have the authority to say, hey, we're going hybrid till further notice. You know, it's more like we need to go hybrid this week, or maybe if it's some kind of strange situation for 2 weeks, and then with the full expectation that following Monday that we're back to 5 days a week. You know, if there was some kind of, like we have a huge number of people that have to be quarantined. But I would think my authority wouldn't extend beyond the 14-day quarantine period, is what I was thinking.
You all right with that? I'm sorry, Jack O'Leary, you're up. You could unmute, let us hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I've read the studies that come out of Johns Hopkins. Dawn mentioned the mental health aspect. I agree with her. I've read the studies that come out of Harvard University and the studies that come out of Johns Hopkins University regarding the students with the mental health. And I've been saying this since last August when I decided to go along with the superintendent with the hybrid model. As a parent, I watch 2 children every day Zoom, and I see their mental health deteriorating. They would be much better off. And I agree with our children being in school for their mental.
I think if you have multiple, if one person turns it on loud, it'd be okay, but if you have 2 people, you're going to feedback.
Yeah, can you off? I think it's picking up Dylan's mic, if the mic is feeding back.
That like maybe.
Can I continue?
Just a second, Jack.
1 second.
Maybe go on, put hers on since she's further away from the mic.
That should be cool.
Yeah, if you have John go all the way, he sounds great on YouTube. It's just in here that he wants to. Yeah, John goes all the way.
My volume is dead. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Came back.
I hear you.
Okay, so Corey, give me a wave if you can hear me. Thank you. All right, because my volume here is not working. I definitely agree that there's a mental health aspect, and I definitely feel that children are better off mentally in school. My argument for the hybrid model all along was that it will allow more children to come into school at least for 3 days, and then the alternative 2 days. And 3 days in school is better for the child's mental health than no days in school. But it has to be done at a level where the parents feel safe to send their child back to school. So that's why, one of the reasons why I was in favor of the hybrid model. But I have to say, as a parent and as a school board director, it was very disheartening at the workshop meeting to hear from the administration that we don't want these children back. So, you know, are we concerned of their mental health? Because if we are, we're going to work for a way to get more children back in brick and mortar school. And I don't see how we say we're concerned with their mental health when we still haven't been able to achieve that. Short term, the only way to achieve that is a hybrid option. Long term, I thought that was the purpose of this reopening committee. So I don't know, as a parent, I'm sitting here feeling I'm getting mixed messages between what was said at the workshop meeting and what's being said tonight. I think we're all concerned about their mental health. And that's the argument that I put forward regarding mental health for the hybrid option. Obviously, that hybrid option is off the table. I don't think it should stay off the table. I think if we're going to entertain these thoughts, everything has to be on the table. So it's just my take on it. Thank you.
Anybody else want to address that issue? One of the questions I would have is, will we be allowing, at the end of the second marking period, kids to come back if they want to? And that's, I don't know if you have an answer tonight, we want to wait till the 10th.
Yeah, that was our plan, is that if there were kids that wanted to come back, that we would let them come back at that time. At the same token, if there, as the numbers heat up, if people start to get cold feet and they want to leave, they can leave at any time. We always allow them to leave if they choose to go because they feel it's not safe for their kids. And that's everybody's personal opinion. There is no right or wrong answer, obviously. So people can leave at any time. But if they want to come back, we have seating charts and seating charts and all that. That will be done at the end of the second quarter. Yeah. And thanks to the hard work they did with the cafeteria seating, I think we've got the wiggle room.
Anybody else? Topics, are you done?
Yes.
Topics for the 10th, do we want to meet on the 10th? That's still on the board, right, 6 o'clock on the 10th? So we'll be meeting, I'll give you some of my topics. I don't have any at the moment, but I'm sure I will. Are there any questions, Corey?
Yeah, we do have a few. Thanks, Jeff. The first one was that, is there going to change the policy regarding families sending their children to school when a sibling or other household member is there? What's the position on that?
There is no change. The parent is strongly recommended that all family members quarantine if there's a member of the household that is positive. So that's no change, but we're just reiterating that to folks. So.
And that would follow the CDC guidance anyway, because that's the first person contact. So.
I put that in my call this week to remind people because we did have some mix-ups where people actually had someone test positive in their family and they sent kids to school. So I wanted to reiterate that in my call the other day to remind people, if one person in your household tests positive, nobody should be coming to school. Everybody's under the 14-day quarantine that's in that household.
And I would say, even if we can't force parents to, if you're keeping your child home from school because you suspect that they potentially have COVID, then you should not send your other children to school either. So even before you get that positive test, if there's a suspicion, I mean, if you're keeping one of your kids home because they have a stomach bug, that's very different than keeping your kids home because you're going to have them COVID tested because you think that they, may have it. So, even though we can't require them to keep everybody home.
Yeah. It's a great point. If you have concerns, play it safe.
Absolutely.
And those notices went home the very first day from our school nurses to every child in the district. So it's symptom chart and.
It may be a good time to send them home again. And as a reminder that.
We certainly can do that.
Yeah, with parent conferences coming up, that might be a time.
Yes. That's a great idea.
Okay, Pam, any comments, questions from you?
Not at this time, Jack. Thank you. Good meeting. Could you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hear you, Pam.
Anyone here in our auditorium would like to say? Be glad to hear you. exhausted all of our places for communication. We've gone through our agenda, and we have 14 minutes left, so I think we're good. We will see you in 15 minutes for the regular board meeting.
Okay.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
To
republic,
the republic for which it stands, a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'll ask Julie for a roll call, please.
Pam, are you hearing any volume?
No, I'm not.
I'm not
Neither
either.
am I.
Jack, Pam, Brian, can you hear us?
Can hear you now, Corey.
Now I hear you.
We can't hear Julie.
May I have a volunteer to read the mission statement, please? All right, thank you, Jess. And Dylan, are we going to keep this mic on or should we mute, unmute? What do you want to do? Mute and unmute for now? Okay. All right, hopefully that'll help clear. You guys good with that? Good? All right, thank you. Yes, if you could, please. Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Before we move on to the presentation by our bond counsel, I'm actually going to ask Dr. Bell if he wants to introduce, or Brian, Abigail Vogel, or? Oh, is she on? Oh, sorry.
Last Thursday, November 12th, where they inducted almost 20 new members. Several students were recognized due to their outstanding PSAT scores as National Merit Scholars, and the Delaware Valley High School hosted the SATs in October. In our athletics department, the girls and boys soccer teams both were league and district champions. The football team was district champions, and they hosted the state qualifier finals. The girls' tennis made it to the district semifinals, and the cross-country team sent 2 members to the state race in Hershey. The girls' volleyball team was also district champions, and the golf team sent 1 member to districts. The marching band also competed in the U.S. Band's virtual competition, where they placed second in Pennsylvania and are moving on to the virtual finals. Some special events that took place in the high school was the Spirit Week, the food drive, Senior Halloween, and the virtual club fair. Junior historians also hosted a drive-by veterans dinner last Tuesday. We also had a color day where we had students wear purple and blue to send positive thoughts to the Pena family. In other news, the Delaware, our school newspaper, posted 2 editions. One was a COVID-19 special edition, and the other was the first regular edition. Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. And what are you involved in any other extracurriculars here at the school? Anything?
Council, and I am also a member of Junior Historian, so I helped out with the drive-by veterans dinner.
Excellent.
Nice.
Very nice.
Nice plug for OM too. That was good.
Any questions for Abigail?
No? How's it going, Abby?
Thank you. Oh, I'm good. How are you?
No, I mean, it's.
Oh. School's going really well. I'm really glad that we started up 5 days a week. It was nice to just get back into that routine. And it was nice seeing people that I don't usually talk to outside of school and getting that in-person experience learning rather than the online that we had in the spring.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. You can stay or you can go if you want. It's entirely up to you.
Okay, I'm gonna go home and do some homework. Thank you.
Totally
Have a good night. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. All right. Now moving over to presentations. We'll have a presentation this evening by our bond counsel, Mr. Jonathan Cox, who is joining us from Zoom.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you all for allowing me to participate remotely this evening. We also have Scott Shearer participating via Zoom, your financial advisor from PFM. So I'm John Cox. I am the school district's bond counsel in Harrisburg with Eckerd Siemens. Before the district this evening, before the board this evening, is a resolution that we have advertised on behalf of the district as required under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. That is a maximum parameters resolution in that it authorizes the refinancing of the general obligation bond series of 2016 of the school district, and also authorizes bonds to be issued to fund various capital projects should the school board wish to move forward with those projects. This resolution, if adopted this evening, provides the maximum flexibility for the school district to move forward on one or more of these endeavors. But as we will discuss, we wanted to seek, this is a parameters resolution that we're adopting for DCED purposes to maximize the flexibility of the school district. But we want to leave this evening with specific direction from the board as your fiduciaries, Eckerd Siemens as your bond counsel and PFM as your financial advisor. Will need specific direction from the school district on how much of this bond, what the size of this bond issue will be in terms of, obviously we think it makes sense to move forward with the refunding of the 2016 bonds for debt service savings purposes. But we also need to leave this evening with direction from the board on how much new money, if you will, the district would like to issue in connection with various capital projects. So we thought in terms of process this evening that we'd like to have the board consider the parameters resolution as in its current form as we drafted it and as we advertised it in the newspaper, which allows all of those options. But then we would have a discussion with the board. First, a motion to consider and to move forward with the refinancing aspect of the project. And then secondly, to have a discussion among the board about whether to proceed with the new money, and if so, how much this year, leaving open the option of either doing the refunding, which will be approximately $6 million, and then either $4 million of new money this year at the same time that we would issue the bonds for the refunding, or $10 million at the same time we would do the refunding, or we would defer, if we do $4 million this year with the refunding, we could defer the additional new money requirements of the school district until next year, when there will be another refunding opportunity that we could look at that time. So in terms of procedure and process, that's what we're recommending. That's the objective this evening. I know that Mr. Shearer has provided, was with the board last week to go over the estimated savings on the refinancing and to review those options for financing the school district's capital projects, either with a $4 million or $10 million borrowing concurrently with the refunding. So I'll defer to the president as to whether you'd like to have discussion on those matters now, or defer that until the appropriate time on the agenda when the resolution will be up for consideration.
I think we have I think if we move that discussion up now, if everybody's okay while we have council on, I think that makes more sense, if that's okay.
That would be fine.
Great.
So again, Mr. President, what we recommended was to have a vote to approve the resolution as we prepared it, subject to further direction of the board, where the board would then take separate action by motion to give us specific authorization as to which direction the board would like to go. So in terms of the discussion, we can defer the vote. Obviously, the vote, the board needs to take public comment prior to voting, but I just wanted to confirm that process is understood, and if there are any questions about procedurally what we're asking the board to do this evening.
Mr. Cox, I have a procedural question for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I understand the resolution, a parameters resolution will allow us to not only refinance the 2016 bond, but it will let us to increase, as I read the resolution, our debt up to $19 million. Is that correct?
That is, again, that's the maximum principal amount. When we do a parameters resolution, we add additional principal to above and beyond the amount that we know that we'll actually need. And we do this purely for DCD purposes, to give your financial advisor the flexibility to move principal around. Bonds are sold in individual maturities, and any given day in the bond market, different maturities may bear different levels of interest that may be more attractive to the district in terms of minimizing the overall total interest savings. But because they're sold in individual maturities, individual blocks, we need to gross up each individual maturity to provide flexibility so as to optimize the ultimate final pricing structure for the bonds. So again, even if the board were to determine to move forward with $10 million of new money at this time, we need about a little over $6 million for the refunding. The actual amount of bonds that will be issued under that scenario would be $16 million. But again, for DCD purposes, we're advertising and would be approving for parameters purposes the $19 million. Does that answer your question?
Hey, John, maybe just to add on to that from the workshop meeting last week. And again, good evening, everyone. This is Scott with PFM. The way I described it at the workshop was that, basically, as you had stated, that the refunding is about $6 million. So for resolution purposes and DCD purposes, we kind of bumped that up to $7 million for the exact reason you had just mentioned and you had just described. And the new money sort of maximum amount that we were talking about at the workshop was $10 million. So we basically bumped that up to $12 million, again, to coincide with the way you described it, John. So that's where kind of the 12 and the 7 came from to get to that 19. But for all intents and purposes, I think the discussion of new money was pretty much limited at the 10 million. That's kind of where we capped it for those discussions. So that's sort of what we had in our mind frame. And then, John, do you want to just briefly describe the filing you do afterwards for the non-completion of what we don't utilize?
Sure. So depending on the board's further direction this evening and what we ultimately decide to move forward with, that's what we'll do. And at the end of the process, we will file what's called a partial non-completion of sale with the Department of Community and Economic Development, which provides them with the actual final numbers and updates their records with that amount, revising from the 19 million that we will be filing on the front end of this process. So that happens really at closing. We file that paperwork with DCED.
Okay, that does answer my question as far as the parameters go, and I thank Mr. Shearer for explaining that. I was present at last week's meeting. I phoned in, and unfortunately, Mr. Shearer, I got nothing of your presentation, so I apologize for that, but I guess that was a communication error. But Mr. Hessling did fill me in on quite an amount of what you covered, but I am sorry that I missed your presentation because I'm sure it would have been informative. Going back to Mr. Shearer, Mr. Cox, if I'm of the mind that I just want to refinance, because I can tell you right now, I certainly want to refinance the 2016 bond. It's a great, I think it's a great thing for the district. We'll save up to $125,000 on doing that, and I'd be all for that. But say tonight that I'm not interested in borrowing $4 million or $10 million, but maybe that will change after the new year and March or April. Could I not then do another resolution at that time to borrow the $4 or $10 million? Could I not then do another resolution? And I understand you like to get it all under one parameters resolution, but is that an option to me to do another resolution for future borrowing at a later date?
Well, you're correct on both fronts. That is, of course, would be an option. The resolution that we prepared, as you indicated, does give the flexibility to issue these bonds in one or more series. So we would not need to follow that approach if we adopted this resolution. Obviously, there are costs associated with preparing the resolution, providing the notices to the newspaper. We have to do a first and second notice with the newspaper. And we have DCED filing fees that we have to pay each time we undertake one of these transactions. So our preference in these under these circumstances, where potentially the financing would be phased in more than one tranche or series, if you will, we like to have all the options incorporated into a single resolution and then get specific direction by the board on which pieces of those transactions you want to move forward with at specific times.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. I'm just a very methodical person, and I like to keep things separate. I don't like them to be too over cumbersome and include too many things in one proposal, and at least certainly the constituents that I deal with, the people that have talked to me about this, like to keep things separate out. We're basically very simple people here, at least I am. So that was my question, if I had that option. And I
understand and appreciate that very much. And that's why we decided to follow the process that we've indicated this evening, to adopt the resolution to provide the maximum flexibility, but then make sure that we come away this evening with further direction from the board. First, to take a minute book resolution or motion to make sure everyone's on board with moving forward with the refunding. Obviously, that's an easier question. And then secondly, to have a discussion about how much new money to move forward with and when. And understanding that discussion might be a longer discussion, and we want to have a vote on that separately. So it was for that reason, Mr. O'Leary, that we decided to break this down into those three pieces this evening.
Okay, well, that answers all my questions. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Shearer, for your work on this. And your very professional answer. So you did answer exactly what I needed to know. Thank you, sir.
Very good.
Are there other questions from the board?
Before we let these gentlemen go, do we want to talk about the pros and cons of the different options? The one option is to just refinance and not borrow anything. The option at the other extreme is to refinance and borrow up to 10 million. And then there's a medium, let's feel like Goldilocks here. There's a middle of the road one with a plan for 6.4 million spread out over 2 purchases. That's what they call scenario 2 in that newest document that we sent you on Tuesday. So do you guys want to talk about the pros and cons and things of that nature, or what you're thinking, while we have the gentleman here to answer any questions that might come up that Bill and I can't answer? Billy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I guess I'm looking at. Everybody hear me? Okay. What do you want me to do?
I think you have to unmute.
You want me to unmute?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? The other day, I mean, when we had Scott come up the other day, the original idea was to refinance and borrow up to $10 million. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the couple of things that I liked about that, it had a lower interest rate because you stayed under 10 million. And looking at the scenarios too, I just want to point out that to go to 10 million, Scott, I want to be correct on this. If we did the red option, the new one you sent yesterday, going into 21-22, there's actually a budget decrease slightly, correct?
I'm just looking at that here, Bill. So there.
Well, it looks like, I mean, we're about to, I mean, 2.93 million was on the presentation on the green option 2B, and now this red one for 21-22 would show.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're comparing it. Yes. You're comparing it to that.
Yeah, I'm kind of
yes,
comparing
that would
last
be
week's
correct.
to this week's, and
Yep.
and
Yep,
of course I'm
that'd be a fair
concerned about
statement.
the 21-22 budget a little bit. And the other thing I just want to point out, the projects that we handed out, and you got that too, Scott, but they come up to about 8.2 million right now over the 3 or 4 years. And when you mentioned that you have to spend down within 3 years, I just wonder, with 8.2 on our plate right now, and things can change all the time, if having the lesser budget impact, and you believe you said that we might be able to get up to 7.3 million on the borrowing?
Yeah, the rationale for that is that, you know, this borrowing now, you know, if you do the refunding now, about 6 million of it, we could get close to 4 million of new money. That one's kind of set. But the next refunding transaction, the one that we could entertain about the same time next year, what we could potentially do, that's a little bit more. That's about 7.4 million. So it's about a little over, close to 1.4 million or 1.2 million more than this refunding that we're contemplating now. But what we could do potentially is refund a little bit less of that transaction, and it will only impact the savings a very minimal amount, not drastically, because we just won't refund one of the very early maturities. Therefore, again, we won't be missing out on much savings, and that will free up a little bit more room to borrow new money. So I think we could get that new money borrowing. Like right now, we're showing it at about 2.6 million in that second phase of the second scenario, but I think we could get that closer to 3 million, 3.5 million, somewhere around there, by just refunding a little bit less of the 17 bonds when we go to do that, assuming market holds out until about this time next year.
And so just for the board members who recommended the 10 million, or at least to look at it, what's your thought on the 7.5? And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but you're doing it with lower interest rates and less budget impact, except you're getting 7.5 instead of 10. But I mean, I can certainly go along with it the other way also. But I just want to mention that the red option really doesn't affect the budget, slight decrease. But I'd like to hear what the board thinks about.
Well, I'll chime in. I mean, looking at the capital projects schedule, which we asked for, if I'm reading this correctly, going through to 2023, the projects will be about 4.6 million. Oh, there's a back page? Oh, wait a minute. Scratch that. Give me a minute.
On the last page.
All right, so that's through 2023 still? 24. Okay, I see that. So 8.2 million through 2024. All right, I got to think what I was going to say. The back page just.
Well, I think it's important that we understand we're not committing to the 8.2 spending at all.
Exactly.
I'm most concerned, and this is where I just, we have to ask council in terms of where will interest rates go over the next, it's possible that be where they are a year from now. I listen to the Fed, and maybe I'm pretty much guaranteeing things are going to stay where they are for 2023. However, markets change. So I'm in favor.
I can't hear Jack.
Money up front and not having a second set of.
Jack, could you unmute your speaker, please?
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
So,
I can hear you.
I'm concerned
Now.
that we borrow the money in a low interest rate environment, which we have right now. I don't think it could go much lower, but it could. And I was saying, if you watch the Fed, they are pretty much guaranteeing through 2023 very little movement. However, markets tend to change. So I'm in favor of what we discussed last week, Bill. Even though I understand you're getting a small decrease in your budgetary impact, but it's negligible in terms of percentages. So I'd like to see us have the money available to do the projects we want to do, and especially to move out of the general fund capital projects that we normally fund through tax increases. So we all know we're going to have a tremendous debate in the next 90 days about whether or not we're raising taxes at all. And this, I think, having these funds available now into next year's budget would alleviate some of that angst that we may be going through in the next 90 days. Maybe not. We'll see where it goes.
So are you recommending the $10 million plan, Jack?
Hang on, somebody's trying to talk from home. Okay, hang on. Okay, go ahead.
So which plan are you recommending, Jack? The $10 million plan, or what we call the blue plan based on the chart?
And Bill, I think that's correct, right? That's the 10 million is in addition to the 6 million we're going to refund. So it's a total of 16. 15.
But I mean, you would get 3.8 million this year to go towards the new projects.
Right.
In the red option.
Yeah, I'm talking about the blue option.
Oh, the blue option, yeah, you would get the 10 right up front. But I also, one other thing I just want to mention is with the spend down on the projects, does taking it out another year help with that? And that might be one of the financial guys' questions there on that spend down.
Yeah, I can
And could
address
you
that.
have the 10 million option, to your point about the interest rates, if they stay low, could we be sitting here next year having the same discussion and then you're 1 year further out, knowing a little bit more and still taking advantage of this year's lower interest rate and having the same discussion next year at either the 4 million or the 10 million option if interest rates stay low. Is that a possibility, and is that accurate?
Are you asking me or
Scott
asking
or
Scott?
John?
Scott, let me address just the federal tax question, and then you can please share your perspective. As Bill indicated, there are restrictions and limitations imposed by the Internal Revenue Code anytime a taxing body issues tax-exempt obligations. One of those is that you have to have, they say, quote unquote, a reasonable expectation at the time of settlement that you will spend 85% of the proceeds within 3 years. If you borrowed the full 10 million, you would be essentially committing that you will spend $8.5 million within 3 years. Now, if you're at 8.2 and that's through 2024, these bonds would settle early 2021. You're very close to that threshold. The issuance costs on the bonds would count towards the 85%. But again, you'd be very close, but you'd be making a commitment under the Internal Revenue Code to move those projects along in a manner that will allow you to meet those requirements. Of course, you could borrow a little bit less than the full 10 million to make sure, to give yourselves a little bit of a cushion in that regard. But conceptually, I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that requirement. Now, Scott, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
No, I think that was fine, John. Thanks.
May I interject here for a moment? Okay. Mr. Fisher watches the Federal Reserve as closely as I do, so I definitely concur with his statement. What the central bank actually said last month was that they would keep interest rates. They foresaw, again, speculation. It's always speculation, as you gentlemen know with finance. But they said they foresaw keeping interest rates at or around zero until the end of 2023, as was just stated by Mr. Fisher. But they made that statement under 3 conditions. And the conditions were that they could foresee themselves raising rates if these 3 conditions were met. And the conditions that they mentioned was 1, that the labor market would need to return to maximum employment. The second was that inflation must increase to 2%, which is the threshold that they feel is for the inflation rate for a healthy economy. And that it needed, that 2% threshold needed to look on track to exceed that threshold for some time. For some time is the variable. We don't have a definition of what they consider for some time, but that's what they said. So again, myself, the question that I've been asked, and I've talked to just about every local official that I could regarding this matter and every business owner I could. And of course, our businesses right now with this pandemic, as with businesses across the world, are very nervous. They're very shaky on this. So again, in keeping it simple, we're talking about borrowing 4 million or 10 million. The question that I get asked by our business owners is how much is 4 million? How much does 4 million cost us? And how much does 10 million cost us? If you could give me a ballpark figure on that, I'm sure they would appreciate that answer.
Well, I think as far as the cost of the 4 million and the 10 million, I think you can, it's somewhat illustrated in that most recent analysis that we provided to the administration a day or two ago, where it's labeled as scenario 1 and scenario 2. Basically in column 6 on that sheet, we're showing that the debt service, which is both the principal and interest over the life of that $10 million new money borrowing, is about $12.9 million. And for the roughly $4 million of new money, the principal and interest over the life is about $4.6 million. So that's
Okay.
kind of the total cost for both of those.
I appreciate that because that was the number one overwhelming question when I talk to local business owners. They're very nervous at this point. They don't want to lose their businesses, and they're wondering how they're going to make ends meet and how they're going to keep their employees employed and how to keep their lights on and their doors open. That's their number one question. What is this going to cost us? We're talking in millions here, 4 million, 10 million, 6 million. What they want to know is bottom line, keep it very simple. How much is this going to cost them at the end? Because eventually the taxpayer is going to have to pay this and the businesses are going to have to pay this over time. That's what they're nervous about. So I thank you again for providing me with the answer and providing them with their answers.
You're welcome.
I think that, well, I definitely agree with
Can you unmute, please?
Sorry. Well, I definitely agree with both Jack and John from last week as far as I think it would definitely behoove us to borrow more than the $3.8 million that we're able to refinance in the 2016 bonds. I think that borrowing the 3.8 now, utilizing scenario 2, borrowing part of the money now and then waiting until we see next year what the climate is, to me, it is the better alternative for both the district as far as making sure that we can meet our capital expenditure, our capital projects that we need to fund in order to keep our facilities for our students and our staff, but also being responsible to our to the local community as well, and just making sure that, you know, we don't know what next year is going to bring, and we've already discussed it over and over again that we have a big hole in our budget. So, you know, I think that borrowing some of it now and then waiting and refinancing next year also, and there's nothing to say that next year, if and hopefully things are much better in the economy, but there's nothing to say that we can't borrow more than the sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but more than the 2.65 next year, if it comes to that. So I like scenario 2.
Well, okay. I was just saying, let's think about scenario 3, which would be we enact scenario 1 tonight, and then Bill, I think we're allowed to next year refund the second half of scenario 2, even if we do scenario 1 tonight. Am I correct with that? Scott, so if we were to borrow the additional 10 tonight, couldn't we not just refund the 7.3 next year?
Sure. I mean, you could do that. You could just not do the refinancing at all right now. Now, the kind of the one sort of mathematical part of the refunding is after once you reach the call date of the bonds, and for the 2016 bonds, it's you know, next spring. So that's why we're looking to do it here in the early part of the year, because IRS allows us to close a few months prior to that. Basically, once you reach the call date, even if rates stay the same, just because now we have less time on our side, the savings will naturally start to diminish, even if rates stay identical. So, you know, it's not a huge amounts, but just mathematically, there is an implication to that. But like I said, it's not going to erode the savings down to nothing in a year, but it will have some impact if it's refunded, you know, 9 months or a year past the call date. But otherwise, yeah, that is an option.
So the answer to my question would be scenario 3 is a possibility, whereby we do get the 10 million now, and next year all we do is refinance the 7.3 if rates are low, so that we can have some savings next year. Remember, if we wait a year and rates go up, we might not want to refinance at all next year. because the rates have gone up and might be costly to do that. So given our current economic situation, I remain in favor of scenario 1, with scenario 2, the second half of it, to be discussed at a later date.
Now, what does that do for us though with because if we take the 10 million, which, I was an advocate of last week, but if we have the 3 years to spend that, or to spend 80% of that, and we only have 4.6% in projects, I mean, unless we were to push the 2024 projects up to 2023, but I've got that question. And then also, Jack, can you talk a little bit more about how you're suggesting using this to bridge the gap in our budget by moving? Yeah, John's shaking his head. Can you
So in
point
our
to that a
budget
little bit more?
for the year, I'll give you an example, which I discussed with Bill. Marvin had vehicles in the general fund budget, which was paid out of general fund taxes. Had we had the money, we could have paid that last year out of the capital reserve and lowered the general fund budget, which is the budget that affects taxes, by that $28,000. And our annual budget for computers, I think one year was near $400,000. I don't know if we're anywhere.
In addition to vehicles, computers are another good place where you can buy it out of the capital fund,
right,
not out of the general fund. So it relieves some pressure that we have every year when you're trying to balance the budget, because you can shift some things out of the budget into capital. In our scenario here, we talked about in some of the out years, we talked about $100,000 a year, getting that out of the general budget from technology to the capital budget. So that takes 100,000 out of the budget, which relieves some pressure. You do the same thing with school buses and vans and stuff like that. So no matter which number you pick, we would advocate the vehicles and computers, trying to get them out of the buy them from capital and not from general budget, because that will make your May a lot more enjoyable trying to balance the budget.
But what does that mean for sustainability now? On the technology of the vehicle replacement plan, now that it's out of operating, you're not going to build that back in when this runs out.
One of the things we looked at from a technology perspective, Vicky's here too, is not buying things out of capital that would be annual cost. But I'll give you an example of something. We bought smart boards for the high school and both middle schools for every classroom all at the same time. And that was before I got here. So it was more than a decade ago, and they're still hanging on, but Dylan will tell you, they're running around swapping parts and everything like that. So if you were to get to a point where you start doing a multi-year replacement of the smart boards, they last for a decade. You don't want to do something that's an annual expense out of capital. You want to do those long-term projects, things like that. Because otherwise you mess up your annual budget.
And in terms of timing, we have to spend 85% within 36 months. We won't be receiving this until January of 2021. And would we have to start the projects, or would we have to finish the projects in 36 months? My understanding from prior refinancing is we have to start the projects, which simply means we have to pass a resolution that says we're going to have our architect begin the process of putting designs together. And you all know the designs and permits could easily take 6 months, but I don't think we have to be finished with all 36. And I guess this is for Mr. Cox, if he can verify that for me, that we need to start the projects within 36 months of the date that we received the funds.
Yeah, Mr. Fisher, there are actually two different tests. The first I didn't discuss, which may have been what you're thinking about, is you have to enter into contracts that commit you to spend at least 5% within 6 months. That's usually easily achieved by the architect's agreements and other planning soft cost expenditures, that you have contracts where you've committed yourself to spend at least 5%. And those contracts you have an expectation that you'll enter into those contracts within 6 months of closing. But the second test that I described earlier, the 85% test, is an expenditure test. You don't have to have the projects completed within 3 years, but you have to have them far enough along that you've spent 85% of the bond proceeds on those projects.
So 85% of $10 million, 8.5 by the summer of 24 seems like it's a real possibility to execute that, John, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, you'd want to watch that closely. You might need to move up some of those projects.
The summer of 24 would be the last summer of work, you know.
Right.
I said the issuance costs. You're right there. You're very close to that 85% expectation right now.
Yeah, I think we'll hit it.
Mr. Cox and Mr. Shearer,
Credit rating, with borrowing this much, does it impact it at all?
can I interject?
I would say on our credit rating, when I answer the questions in all those calls, they look at your debt. We certainly have room for what they call on the borrowing base, that we're not even near that. So, I mean, our debt is low enough that whether it's 4 million or 10 million, I don't think it's going to raise any flag to the credit rating company. I think making sure our budgets are balanced and how we're going to do that is crucial to the call when I'm making those. But Scott, you sit on a lot of those with me. You would agree that either way, 4 or 10 million is not going to raise a flag for our credit?
That's right, Bill. Yep, I agree with everything you said.
Okay.
And if I recall, our maximum debt allowance would be near about $155 million, and we're not even a third of that.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of room if we ever needed to borrow anywhere near that. Hopefully we won't. But we need to always keep that into consideration as to maintaining a sterling reputation in the bond community.
I have a question. So if we're talking about ways of reducing our general fund, our expenditures in the general fund side, but if we refinance and we take $10 million in new money, then isn't it, I mean, there's an increase in what we're going to have to pay towards our debt service. So where scenario 3 would be very similar to what we are paying now. I mean, we're going to be taking things out of our general fund just to be paying for our debt service, correct?
It's about $300,000 more to do the blue 10 million borrowing versus the red one, right? Because instead of next year's budget, instead of being 2.9, it would be almost 3.2.
Right. So whereas
no, that first year.
No, the first year, there's a big jump. Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my concern, is that in a year that we're not sure what next year is going to look like, that's a big jump to our budget. If there's even taking out some of our, right, even if we take out some of our items from our general fund, the general fund, and put it towards our capital reserve items, money rather. I'm concerned about that. So again, I still reiterate that I support scenario 3.
And interject. Okay, just for our general public that is watching, our taxpayer that are watching tonight that may not be aware of how we normally do things, our capital improvement projects, roofs, boilers, repavement, renovations, things like that we do every summer, our summer projects, they come out of money that is left over from our general operating budget. And in October, we usually, at least for the 8 years that I've been on the board, and for the 2 years that I came to meetings before I was on the board, I watched that money that was left over from the general operating budget get transferred to a capital reserve fund. And that's what we normally fund. we no longer, in my conversations with our business manager, we're no longer looking at having that. We're not looking to have that money, any extras at the end of this year. At the August 13th meeting, I made a prediction that some people agreed with and some people didn't agree with. But the prediction was basically word for word Ross Perot's speech against NAFTA at the 92 debates, at the 1992 presidential debates, where he said, by the time you fix everything, you've bankrupted the country. And I made the prediction that if we went to the model of 5-day a week in school and chose to disregard the superintendent's recommendation of doing hybrid, that we would go bankrupt. My contention tonight is that we are not bankrupt, but we're well on the way. As you've just heard, and certainly everyone agrees, we have a big hole in our general operating budget, a hole that did not exist at that August 13th meeting. So 3 months later, we've accomplished a gigantic hole in our budget. So Mr. Cox and Mr. Shearer, you are financial advisors, and I would like to take advantage of your expertise. But as just an ignorant construction worker, I don't see the point in going out and borrowing money at this point if I am not going to fix why my general operating budget is bleeding. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially when I would go out and borrow money and I would only raise my general budget fund, I would bleed more money. So, you know, is this the advice you would give us, or would you give us advice to first fix the problems we have in the general operating budget before we even contemplate buying or taking out more debt service? Just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, great question. I think my initial reaction is to take a holistic approach. I mean, that's typically what we, tell our clients, that I don't think we're looking for a Band-Aid here, right? I think we're looking to make a sustainable budget for the district going forward by doing capital projects, and again, also making sure the general fund, the operations are able to at least break even or not run in a deficit. So I would say it's always good to do both. I mean, have a capital plan, make sure you're spending the money on what you need to, as well as what you're legally able to, but also to make it to focus on not fostering any sort of underlying systemic issue with your budget. So yeah, I think both need to always be looked at for prudent financial management.
Thank you, sir. But our major part where we're bleeding mostly is that we have a certain percentage of our student population who has entered into a very expensive cyber school. The devastating thing that I've talked to other people about is that if we had to close our doors, because a certain percentage of those students are in school right now, there is a percentage, I don't know if it's a small percentage or a large percentage, but given the choice, if we had to close the school, they were not able to come to school and they had to do it from home, a certain percentage of that would go to an outside cyber school, which would only exacerbate the financial situation we find ourselves in today. So since we don't know what the government money is coming in, we don't know what the government will do in the next few months as far as a bailout or a stimulus package or anything like that. We really don't know, at least me as a board member, I've not found out what our cleaning costs have been or the total number. I know what our cyber school costs are, but I've not been informed of the other things. It just doesn't make sense for me to make this judgment tonight, because these projects that we're doing, these capital improvement projects, it's not like they're going out to bid tomorrow. We have time to do this. It's not like when you go and you buy a car at a dealership and the used car salesman walks up and tells you this offer expires today. We have time to do this. I would like to have answers to questions as far as what are our expenditures, how we're going to close the gap in our budget before we even contemplate borrowing new money, because none of these projects are going to be started tomorrow morning. If we were to borrow this money March, April, May, it could still be done. So thank you, sir.
I just wanted to point out that as far as scenario 2 goes, the benefit of scenario 2 is the fact that our debt service amounts that we would be paying towards next year aren't not increasing for next year, and we're still then getting new money to be able to put towards capital projects. So I think that it's one of the reasons that I do support scenario 2 is because I think it's a win-win for everybody. We're not, there's no cost to the taxpayer as far as increasing our debt service payment each for that year. And like I said, then we also have money on hand to at least start some of those capital projects, or to then pay down our general fund.
Okay, let me make sure
Jack Fisher.
Thank you, Jessica. In addition to what you're saying, you have to point out that the 7.365 million next year assumes no change in interest rates. So that if interest rates change, not only will we not be refinancing next year, we won't be borrowing again next year, the additional 2.6. Therefore, if that's the case, then we are short $4 million in our capital reserve planning, because we're planning on spending $8.228 million over the next 4 years. If interest rates were to surge, we might be looking next year to have to borrow the additional monies at a higher interest rate. And I'm not sure what the impact on the budget will be, but this scenario 2 here makes a big assumption about new local effort. And that assumption is interest rates stay where they are now. I would rather know what I have and utilize it now than to wait for a year. Boards change, people change, economics change. I think we could give the administration a real solid path as to how we're going to fund our capital projects over the next 4 years under scenario 1. Under scenario 2, it's a very wishy-washy path to getting that $8.2 million funded. So I'd rather take what we have now and utilize that. And I understand we're going to go from 2.483 local effort to 2.542. And Bill, maybe you can tell us what the millage impact is, but every 400,000, 450,000 is a percent. So that's 0.25% more that we'd have to pay now. But we know we've solidified our capital projects. And as Scott has said, we'll take a holistic approach as opposed to a piecemeal approach. That's the difference between the two. So I'm really in favor of putting the money in the administration's hand, that they know when they go to look at projects that must be done. And there are items on this list, John, that you gave us that are a part of the wish list. So I'm not sure we're going to do all that immediately, but there'll be other places that will pop up where we're going to have to spend this money. How many square feet of buildings do we have, Bill? 300,000 square feet? You'll spend $8 million pretty quick, So
4 campuses.
What's that?
4 campuses.
Yeah, on 4 campuses. So I just don't see interest rates going lower. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll go to 0. And in fact, I think I've read in Europe they went to negative. Negative interest rates. So I'm hoping we don't go there in this country, but I really do think that 10 million is what we need to borrow now in new money to get everything squared away for the next 4 years. And yes, 4 years from now, who's ever sitting on this board, we'll have some decisions to make then also. How do you fund the next round? Yeah.
Bill, what's in the capital reserve fund right now?
1.6.
There's about one. There's about 1.4 remaining after we had some bills from there was a roof that just got finished. We're waiting for the warranty and things like that. There's about 1.4.
We've heard from Bill Hessling, his opinion. I'd like to hear from Dr. Bell. I don't know if he's speaking.
understanding it correctly. Our existing local effort for 21-22, let's say, is 2.48, 2.952. Under the first option, it essentially stays the same. Second option, it would go down a little bit, correct? Second option 2 essentially stays the same, but goes up to 3.1 that second year. And essentially, under the green, the third option, the 2B, it stays essentially the same as where we would be if we borrowed nothing. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Option 2 only provides us with 6.4 plus the refinancing.
Okay.
Option 1 provides us with 6.2 in refunding plus 10 million. So when you look at those two the new local effort of 37 million versus the new local effort of 42 million, that's because we're borrowing much, much less on option 2.
But the new local effort is more.
On option 1, the new local effort is more because we're borrowing.
Maybe I don't have the right sheets.
Oh, sorry.
Because
Do we have an
that's
extra one
not what I-
appropriation bill?
So you're asking
Okay, just, I don't have the,
So to continue while Bill's getting you that, under option 1, we provide scenario 1, we provide all the money the board needs for the next 4 years. Under option 2, we only provide 6.4 million of the needed 8.2 over the next 4 years. So we're still short under option 2 by almost $2 million. That's why it looks, if you compare just column 12 to column 7, it would look like a no-brainer if you were talking about the same dollars of borrowing, but you're not. In option 2, scenario 2, you're talking about a total borrowing of 20 million. In option 1, you're talking about a borrowing now of 16 million plus 7.3 million if we do the refinancing next year. So I understand the scenarios, but they're not apples to apples. They're
Right, basically, you're getting another, in the blue one, scenario 1, you're getting over 3 million more in borrowing for 300,000 more first year cost.
Yeah.
And then the second year, it's an increase of about, it's about 250 more. And then after all the outer years, it only becomes about 150 more after that. But yeah, you're getting more money for that larger cost. The question is, can you swallow it or not?
Right.
Pam, you had a comment, I believe?
Yeah, I have a good impression of what Bill Hessling is recommending. I was wondering if we could hear from Dr. Bell.
Go hybrid. No, that was another month. Sorry, that was a different time.
Well,
I had to break the math stuff.
We
gotta
do
listen to
respect your
food here.
opinion, and this is not to say that.
Well, one of the things, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe the red is the hybrid. I don't know what that is. I didn't mean it that way, but I was going to ask John and Scott, can you just talk about, can you help us with, if we're borrowing 10 million, isn't there some kind of change or an increase in interest rates or what these, I think Scott said something last week about, because you're borrowing so much that it triggers something. Can you just explain that part for us?
Sure. Yep. The IRS gives the school district every January 1 kind of a clean slate. And from a borrowing standpoint, even though you're on a July 1 to June 30 fiscal year, they look at it from a January through December. That if you borrow 10 million or less, basically less than 10 million, your bonds could be designated as bank qualified versus if you borrow over $10 million, they're going to be designated as non-bank qualified. The difference between those kind of transactions, well, there's usually a difference in interest rate between those two kinds of transactions. For instance, there could be a transaction that prices at 9,995,000 at say a 1% rate, and there could be a transaction price that same day for $10.1 million and it's 1.3%. And it's just because of that bank qualification designation. Now that delta between those two kind of borrowings fluctuate. Again, right now, I would say it's probably about 0.25%, somewhere in that ballpark. And that changes fairly frequently, but yeah, there is a difference between keeping your borrowing less than 10 million versus over 10 million.
All right, thank you.
That shows up in the savings on the refunding between scenario 1 and scenario 2.
Yep.
So in scenario 1, the refunding savings are 80,000. Scenario 2, 124,000. That's purely a function of the bank qualification versus non-bank qualification.
And Pam, to answer your question, I didn't mean to dodge it. I just wanted to get that clarification. I'm struggling with this too. On one hand, it's great to have the 10 million and get the bird in the hand, but on the other hand, I'm worried about adding 300,000 to our annual budget because I already know it's going to be a bear. So that's the struggle. That's where I'm wrestling with it. That's why I've been listening to everybody's comments. So I haven't made a judgment yet. And for when everybody gets done, if you need a recommendation, we'll make a recommendation, but I want to let everybody have their chance first.
Dr. Bell,
Do you have any other?
my sound is feeding in and out. Did you say that would add another 300 to our budget every year? 300,000?
Jack, the first year, it's 300. It'll cost us 300,000 more to take the 10 million. Then the second year, it's only a difference of 250, and then after that, it drops to about 150 more per year.
So yeah, I understand your apprehension, John, because the 300,000, that's almost a 0.75% tax increase, 200,000. And I know every year you're worried about that. So I understand your apprehension. I have very similar apprehensions to it. Again, as I said, our general budget is bleeding, and I just don't want to make it bleed anymore. So under these times, how much can we tax people? How are we going to cover that bear? So my apprehension, Dr. Bell, is the same apprehension that you have. Thank you.
And just to talk budgets for a minute, because I know there's anxiety with budgets because of what we're going through. We had a larger than normal surplus last spring because we were shut down. And now we're going to run a deficit this year. The idea in our head, hopefully, is that next year will be a normal year. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to plug the hole for the deficit we have at the end of this year. And I think that's going to come from I think the best place to do is take that money out of our reserve accounts to get us back to zero and then build a normal budget for next year, because we have some of the surplus from last year that'll help us mitigate that, but we're going to have to close the gap. It's kind of like no different than at home. You have an unexpected problem where you got a hole in your roof or whatever, and you got to go into your savings. You don't want to charge it to a credit card. You're going to go to your savings, take the money out of your savings, pay the roof off, and now you're back to square one again. If we take money out of our reserve accounts to pay off whatever our deficit is for this year, we'd be back to square one. We just don't want to put reserve money into next year's budget if we can avoid it, because that's a problem that you never get rid of. It keeps reoccurring every year.
Right. I have two things. One, with the 1.4 million that we currently have in the capital reserve, if you do the 6.4, that's bringing you to, we have 7.8 available funds, which is just shy of what we need in that time. However, I'd also like to know, for the $300,000 tax burden that would be the 10 million if we took that, do we have $300,000 in the general fund that we would now be moving to the CapEx because we fund it? In other words, is that going to help fill the gap in the budget?
Right. And one of the things we were looking at, separate from the $300,000 cost, we were looking at 100,000, taking 100,000 out of the budget for technology and moving that to CapEx, and 100,000 for new vehicles out of the general budget into CapEx. So that gives you 200 of your 300. You still have to find another 100 somewhere to get you back to even.
That's no longer helping our general fund because we're just using that
Right, you'd have to
those
find another
things.
100 just to break even before you
Right,
did anything to
plus
benefit.
where you have
Right,
no benefit.
Right, you haven't benefited the
Right.
budget yet. Yep.
And I know, Dawn, you have one other thing, but just to be clear, when you said about the fact that we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what next year is going to look like and we do have a tax burden, I didn't get the impression that you did not want us to ask for any new money. So I assume you still are looking for us to, when we're refinancing these bonds, to get some new money, whether it's the 10 million or the 6.4, correct? Okay. So when Jack was talking, it sounded like he potentially thought that you did not want any new money because of that.
Yeah, no, the part that Jack brought up a long time ago about we don't have those annual surpluses to go into the capital reserve. So now we have to have a whole new strategy on how to fund capital reserve, which is the refinancing and borrowing with a wraparound. Yeah, that's a good point.
Pam just texted me help, so I think she might want to talk. Hold on just a minute. Pam?
I had the echo annoying, but my question is simple. I don't see our residents and business owners really being able to afford a tax increase this year. The bottom line for me is, what do we need to do, Jack Fisher and Bill, John, everyone, to really help our community? Which of these, in my mind, I'm not sure is going to help our community, because for now, I personally do not see supporting any kind of increase. So I want to do what's going to help our struggling community.
Okay, I'll take that on.
Okay.
If you look at scenario 2 and just do the refunding and the new money, that's the 10 million that we talked about originally. If we do no new money, we save 124,000 with no new money, maybe even more, Bill. And therefore we assist with our problem with taxes. And if I'm hearing the board right, I don't see there's 5 people on this board that are going to raise taxes in March. I mean, Pam just said she's not in favor of it. So if we're not raising taxes, then just refund the $6.2 million. And let's just throw that money at next year's budget. And then we'll leave it up to John next year and Bill to find a way to come up with the 8.2 million that we want to have in the capital reserve. But if the issue is taxes, just refinance the $6.2 million.
And then we'll take the gamble on next May and hope that things stay.
Yeah. I think the gamble right now is that we're going to get to March and start putting together a budget, and there are not enough folks here who are going to raise taxes 2%, even though we could go to 4%. And that would then throw a monkey wrench into everything that John is thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if we don't raise taxes and we don't borrow money for capital projects, we are in a bad place.
Yeah.
All that work that prior administrations and boards did to put us in a good place, we're all going to walk out of here someday and leave this place in a really bad place. Because if we don't get revenue from taxes and we don't have bond money to keep our facilities up, and they're going to start getting dilapidated like schools back in the valley, we're in a really bad place. That having no bonds and no increases would be dire. It would be so anti-DV.
Right.
Now, if we go for the additional money and we can put things that are currently in operating through capital reserve, at least for the first year, because I don't like taking all of that out completely either, because then how are you going to fill that gap later? But just now, we're in extraordinary times. So use that money to fill the gap for the next year, but then we've got the funding going forward, and hopefully we'll be in a different situation with the whole, being able to raise the taxes on a minimal amount and whatnot to sustain it. I
feel like we're back in August trying to figure out what school's going to look like, because there isn't a right or wrong answer. There's valid points to both kinds of borrowing. There really is. That's why I think you're all struggling with this so much, because there's pros there's pros and cons to the 10 million, and there's pros and cons to the lesser borrowing.
But we're also looking at, I mean, there's, depending on who you're watching, they're saying, even with the vaccine, because so many people aren't going to take it, that this is going to carry on. We're looking at a administration change. There's a lot of things on the horizon that can be damaging to us as far as financially. So a year from now, what is it going to look like as far as taking that money? If we only refinance the current bond, I think John brings up a very good point. Where are we going to be with getting these repairs and replacements done? And how much are we going to hurt a year from now? Whereas we can use this money to get through this year. I don't know. It's a hard one.
Well, certainly if we have 1.3 million right now for capital reserves, and we're going to spend 800,000 next year, next summer, that leaves us $500,000 next year when we sit here to refinance next year's bonds. If rates are applicably low, we're down to 500,000 in the capital reserve. We get all next year's summer's projects done, 2021, and we have $500,000, and we begin the process of piecemealing, which John knows will lead to the degradation of your buildings, which are all very proud of. And I'm not in favor of that. I'd rather have the money for capital in hand as we go forward. And if we have a $300,000 step up in the debt service, and we know we can save 200, I'm pretty sure Bill and John can get together and find 100,000 in an $85 million budget that we can swap to make those two even, so that the debt service and the change in the general fund is neutral. And then all we have to worry about are the big thing in the budget, and the big thing in the budget, 80% of the budget is salaries, benefits, and so forth. Then we can start to address that. But if we don't have our capital fund solidified, everything's going to come into play on that side. So I want to get that taken care of. But I understand, Jessica, totally what you're saying. It's costing us 300,000, but we're going to save 200, and I'm sure we can find an extra 100 to neutralize that increase. But we've taken care of the capital side of the budget for the next 4 years. So to me, it's being prepared as we go forward. And I think it's what we've done in the past, to be honest with you. After 25 years of coming to board meetings, we've always done it this way. We've always made sure we had our capital money in hand, as we went forward.
I had one more question. How much money do we have in our PSERS account?
Sorry, Pam, could you repeat that?
Yes, how much money do we have in our PSERS account?
Oh, in the general fund balance? I'll get that for you.
Jack Fisher, as you know, we are able to remove money from the PSERS. We made that agreement years ago when we put money in there. I just wondered what is in there at this point in time.
And again, that's in the general fund, but it's 6.1 is what we have in the PSERS.
And we have the option in the future of moving some of that money out if we wanted to. We would have to vote on it, of course.
We started using some of that fund balance money to fund this year's budget because we decided not to have a tax increase.
And how much did we take out?
Well, no, let me rephrase that. On paper, we would have started using it, but we ended up with a surplus in 1920. So that is funding the use of the fund balance.
Okay, so
rephrase that.
We still have the 6 point something in there.
We decided last year to freeze the PSERS local effort at last year's number and use that PSERS money for any further increases that the state is going to throw at us for future PSERS increases.
Okay.
Yes, at some point, Pam, maybe even this year, we'll begin to be using that PSERS money to bridge the gap. And the question would be, freeze it at last year's, or we're going to have a 1-year lag every year as we go forward and increase it a year behind. And my thought was we're going to freeze it permanently until all that PSERS money is gone. And then that now we're 12 years down the road, and then we have no PSERS money left. So it's.
And then just also with last year, our surplus was 1.4 million. We took 800 of it to balance this year's budget. So that leaves 600,000 to put towards this year's deficit.
Right.
So if this year's deficit is 1.9, we have 600 to throw at it. That gets our deficit to 1.3. So we're going to have to take 1.3 from either PSERS or OPEB reserve account to plug that $1.3 million hole, or whatever it might be at the end of the year. But that gives you an idea of where we're forecasting right now.
That's if there's no tax increase under your scenario.
No, that's the balance this year's budget before we even tackle next year's budget. Because otherwise our revenues are going to be under our expenses by potentially $1.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to need money from the reserve accounts this year to get us back the whole, and then hope we have a normal year next year.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
Brian, I think you had a comment to make.
Yeah, thank you, Corey, and I appreciate everyone's insights and comments. I just want to very briefly say I could support voting for either the blue or the red plan, but I think we have to take advantage of the low interest rates. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do, and it's just a matter of deciding which one we want to go forward with. I would just highlight what John Bell said before. To not take advantage of this would put us in some dire straits. So I think we should take advantage of it. What I'm hearing is we will find a way to manage with either scenario 1, the blue, or scenario 2, the red, that it will put us in good position for taking care of our facilities for some years down the road. Each plan comes with a couple of pluses. Each plan comes with a couple of potential negatives, but neither the pluses or the negatives are overwhelming. So I think we have to just decide. I hope we will just decide which one we want to go with and pick one of those. So thanks. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Brian.
And probably being yourself a professor of history and a political consultant on TV, we probably shouldn't have colored them red and blue. We should have picked 2 other colors, right? It's the wrong climate.
Green and yellow would have been much better.
Dear. And I agree, Brian. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions for these 2 gentlemen now while we have them on the line? Bill?
I'd just like to thank them both for coming here tonight and explaining this. Very appreciative of them.
You bet. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
You bet. So you're okay if we exit now?
Yeah, I think that's fine now, and then we'll move on. I think at this point, John and Bill will be able to answer most of these intricate questions. So.
Okay.
Bill, if you need me to jump back on, send me a text.
Yeah, I got your, yeah, both of you. I'll just, I'll text you or call you if for some reason we need you. Okay?
Yep. Sure thing. We'll be around. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
Thanks, man.
You bet. Bye-bye.
All right, so at this point, 2 things, and I'll see what the board, what you all want to do. Do you want to move through the rest of the agenda and chew on those thoughts for a little bit? Or would you rather just jump to approvals while we're into the flow of the discussion? I don't mind either way. Okay, yep, that's fine. So let's, for now, let's move through the agenda, because these are small. Let's move through the rest of this. Then we have a quick executive session and we'll jump back into it. That'll give time for everybody to chew on this for a few minutes and clear our minds a little bit. So at this point, I'd ask to move back to the approval of minutes from the regular board meeting held on October 20th.
Move. Oh, they're joking.
Oh, yeah. I was like, what I messed up now? It's like, I'm definitely unmuted. So, from the regular board meeting held on October 29th, 2020. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. We'll move on to the administrative reports and attendance reports. Are there any comments on the administrative reports or attendance reports? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the financial reports. Are there any comments on the financial reports? No. All right, moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Bell?
Okay, thank you. I'll go very quickly, I promise. I just wanted to echo Abby's remarks about what a great fall season we had with district, league and district titles all over the place. Volleyball, boys soccer, girls soccer, football, kids going to cross-country states. It was really a great year. It was a great fall. Now, a couple of months ago, we were worried if we'd even have a fall season, and we not only had it, but we had a stellar season. So congratulations to everybody involved in fall sports. After a lot of conversations among the superintendents in the Lackawanna League, we recommended today to the high school principals and the athletic directors, and they approved it as well, that instead of tomorrow being the first day of winter sports, it'll be pushed back 2 weeks until December 4th. And no decision's been made about middle school sports, but there's a very good likelihood they may be pushed to January 4th, which is the Monday we come back after New Year's. We're up to 15 cases at COVID cases. The way that the Department of Health tracks it, though, it's only 10 cases because there's some related people throughout that. So it's only 10 cases in terms of DOH, but we keep track of there's 15 people that tested positive, either students or employees. Next week is a short week because it's Thanksgiving. We have a full day on Monday. Kids have a half day on Tuesday, and then that's followed up with parent-teacher conferences on Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday night, all being done via Zoom. And then Wednesday is a half day, both for the students and the staff. And just a reminder, we're off Thursday, Friday, and the infamous Deer Day on Monday after, Monday the 30th. So we'll return on Tuesday, December 1st. And then I wanted to reiterate what I said in the committee meeting, is that despite all the rumors going on around town, we have no plans to change from the model that we're in right now with the 5-day-a-week in person and the 5-day-a-week Zoom and all the other options, homeschool, cyber, et cetera. So our plan is full speed ahead. Everybody's doing a great job. And we thank everybody for their efforts, and we ask them to don't let their guard down and keep on plugging. Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right, thanks, John. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Bell?
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Bell.
All right, moving on to the treasurer.
Hello? Dr. Bell?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I would just like to, I know this is not an intentional oversight, Dr. Bell, but I would like if we could just go back to any poor individual that has contracted COVID or has tested positive. That's hard enough on them. Could we please just go back, even if it's blatantly obvious who they are, could we just please go back? I think it's kinder to referring to them as individuals. I know certainly the last couple of cases, it's been blindly evident, but I think we could do better than that. And just, could you please go back to referring to them as individuals? For their anonymity and for their mental well-being. Thank you.
Yeah, John agreed. So thanks for that comment, Jack.
Thank you, John.
All right, moving on to, unless there's any other comments. Nope, good. Brian, good. Okay. Moving on to the treasurer's report. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
Motion. Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the bills for payment, which include the general fund, cafeteria fund, and capital reserve fund?
So moved.
Second.
Pam.
Is there any discussion?
Just that, Bill, I think our cafeteria fund is just about exhausted. Is that what I'm reading on that report? No? Okay. Tell me where I'm missing. I thought we were down to 40.
Where did it go? It was up last month. I can't hear
No,
anyone again.
That is, that is a typo or a report. I'll check on that, but no, it's 400. It is, I'll have to check on that and get back to you.
Yeah, it was a lot
I'll check
higher
on
than that.
Yep, good question.
All right, are there any other comments on the bills for payment? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries.
With the amendment that Bill is,
With-
the
correct,
cafeteria fund.
yes.
It's got to
Yes.
be revised, yes.
Yep. Moving on to personnel items, may I have a motion to approve the personnel items, including resignations, appointments, requests for child rearing leaves, change of status, and change of effective date? Is there any discussion on the personnel items? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Now we're going to move into a quick executive session to discuss a student issue before we move into approvals. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Pam, Brian, and Jack will give you a call on your phones, okay? Thank you.
Move into the band room, I'm assuming.
All right. May I have a motion to move back into regular session?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Moving on to items for approval. May I have a motion for the approval of additional volunteers as per the attachment? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the expulsion of student 2020-2021 100-13770 for 90 school days with the right to reapply after 45 school days if stipulations are met. All those in favor say aye.
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 Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to readmit student 2019-2020 100-11707 effective November 6, 2020. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the adoption of the compensation agreement for the school police officers, district level coordinators, and network technicians? Discussion on that topic. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. Got that, Julie? Hearing one objection, the motion carries.
Did you get everyone on Zoom
I
on that?
think so. Brian, Pam, Jack, you were in agreement to that last motion? Good.
Yes, sir.
All right, great, thank you. May I have a motion for the approval of the updated athletic health and safety plan as per the attachment? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Hearing one opposition or one objection, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of board policies as listed 1 through 21?
So moved.
Any discussion on any of those policies? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to adopt the resolution as presented by the bond council, subject to further direction of the board as per the attachment? Any discussion?
Yeah, I would very much like to vote in favor of refinancing the 2016 bond. I think it's a smart financial move. It can save us up to $125,000. Unfortunately, I can't approve this resolution as is currently written because it would allow further borrowing, and I don't feel that is fiscally responsible for the district to be doing at this time.
A quick clarification on that, Bill, on that topic. This is just the approval of the resolution, but there's no additional borrowing built into this, correct? That comes at a later motion or?
Yeah, the way I heard bond counsel explain it was this motion gives the parameters that to allow for it. And then the next two motions is if someone was not in favor of the refinancing, they could vote no. And then the other motion, if somebody wasn't in favor of the borrowing, they could vote no. But I believe this motion could be voted on. It gives the option.
Okay.
It's the next two that give the direction.
So
what I believe.
theoretically, you could vote in favor of this resolution and then in favor of the refinancing and then opposed of any new borrowing, and you'd be safe, correct? All right. Does that answer that?
Yeah,
Corey.
the resolution though is what becomes the public document for public comment, correct? So they'd be commenting on the 19 million. Right? Am I right? I'm just
Right.
asking, am I right or wrong there?
Yeah, and if
Yes.
Right, because that's the but that's the public directive we'd be giving by adopting this resolution.
And if the resolution were to fail, you couldn't even refinance the bonds because the resolution is giving you the authority to consider both things, But if it went down, then the next two items would be go up in smoke, because you have to have a resolution and then you give direction.
Right, but I think what Jack is saying, Jack O'Leary, is he doesn't want the resolution to have the ability to do more. It doesn't mean we're definitely doing more, but it's meaning we're putting out to the public that this is under consideration.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for
Hold on,
understanding that. Dawn. I'm not opposed to the resolution to refinance the existing 2016, but what I would like to be read into the record is that I oppose the parameters in this resolution.
Okay.
I don't oppose the resolution. I oppose the parameters that are set forth within this resolution.
Right.
So I'd like that to be recorded, please.
Absolutely. All right, are there any?
So just to be clear, so if we're not in support though of the 10 million, of borrowing up to $10 million or borrowing $10 million, we still have to approve this in order to be able to approve and vote for less money. And we can't change this.
You need to unmute.
Basically, the resolution is the gobbledygook. It's the legalese to let you do refinancing and or borrowing. And then now you're going to decide in your next two votes what exactly you want to do. But the parameters were like the big tent, and now you're going to define what you want to do.
And I do believe
This is why I
last
was
time we
opposed.
did this, the same thing. We passed a resolution that was up here and yeah.
This
And
is
the
why I
resolution
opposed the
covers
parameter
scenario two
resolution.
in its entirety.
I wanted individual resolutions.
Yes, because there's even
So
for
the
the 10.
parameters even take into consideration next year's borrowing in January of 22. No, that's going to be different. So it doesn't. So we're not even voting on scenario 2 tonight.
You'd be voting on the first half of it.
In theory, if we just go with the refinancing plus the additional 3. Right.
You'd be voting on half of the borrowing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we come back this time next year.
Or next year it could be the 7 plus 10 more.
Right.
And
Is there any other discussion on this motion for the resolution? All right. So we have a motion. Do we second? That's discussion. And what's that? Oh, yes. Thanks. I just got to run through my. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Hearing one objection, the motion carries. Now we'll move on. May I have a motion for the approval to authorize the financing team to proceed with refinancing of the 2016 bonds?
Motion.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Corey, I missed that. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, this is for the this is the authorize the refinancing of the bonds. So this is the savings of 125-ish?
24,292.
Yep, so 125 to the district essentially.
So this is the refinancing of the 2016 bond only.
This is all estimates.
Yeah.
Column 8, right?
Right. Yes, this is just the refinancing, not anything additional money. That would be in the next motion.
But I'm correct. It's column 8 on the blue sheet. On the blue and red sheet, column 8.
8 on the blue and red sheet. No, not to be, well, again, these are all estimates.
Yeah.
But my understanding is it depends which option you take. If you on the refunding, because it would be either column 5 or 8. If there's new money involved. If there's no new money involved, then it is. Then it's column 8, correct?
Voting on, but what we're voting on is 5, not 8. This one here, H, approval authorizing refinancing of 2016 bonds. Is it scenario 1, column 5, or scenario 2, column 8?
It would be,
I
it's
think,
all estimates, but. let
yeah,
me-
and isn't that going to depend on what the
Well,
next
but-
motion is?
yeah, but
Because
let-
that depends on whether we're a bank issue or a non-bank issue, which affects the rate, which I'm assuming is what's the difference
All right.
between those two
Let's go
refinance.
back to the resolution. You're going to see in the guts of the resolution, it says with a minimum savings of $80,000.
Okay.
So in other
Okay.
words, you can't just, you got to have somewhat of a target. So the resolution says 80. So under either scenarios, the projection is it would be at least 80.
Gotcha.
With either no new money or up to 10 million, it's at least 80.
Correct.
Okay.
But the new money can't be 3.81 million if we do 6.235, because it would be over the 10 million, which is bank qualified.
One more time on that, please.
So column 9 says new money of 3.8 million. But if we take 3.8 and add it to 6.2, we're going to be over $10 million bank qualified. That's my concern is, are we doing it correctly so that we stay under the 10 million bank qualified?
I think this motion is, it would be to get at least $80,000, depending on what option you go. But I mean, the 6.1 to 3.8 is 10. I mean, under the 10 in theory.
0.2 puts us over
10 and under. Well, it's 10 right on the nose.
Yes. 6.25. That's what we're voting on.
This is being voted on. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, last week's presentation had, and again, it even says at the top for illustrative purposes. So again, they're all estimates, but the guts of the resolution says you got reach at least $80,000 savings, regardless of how you structure it. And Jack, to answer your question, last week's option it was the green option that ended up with the wraparound structure. They have it at $9,995,000. So in other words,
So we're not voting on scenario 1 or 2. We're voting on last week's presentation.
Right, just to refinance.
Just the-
That's next. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on that motion?
Yeah, can I just, because Corey, the sound is really bad. So could I just have clarification on that, a final clarification? Since item G has already been approved and I was the only lone opposition to it, that's already been approved. It's a matter of record. If I'm in favor of voting for the refinancing of the 2016 bond, which would save us $80,000 to $125,000 as written, I can vote yes on this, and it's only the 2016 bond.
Correct.
Is that correct?
And then you could vote no on the next one, and that would not be any additional money.
Correct. And if you didn't hear Ashley, she said that you could vote yes on this and then no on the next motion, and you're good.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you very much for clarification.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this motion? All right. There's no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to authorize the financing team to proceed with blank in new money currently, well, subject to fill that piece in, concurrently with the refinancing of the 2016 bond. So essentially, this motion is essentially just the increase of any new money.
Whoever makes the motion has to put the number.
Right, and then we'll go back. Yep. So maybe there's a motion and a second for this discussion on this topic.
No, we have to put a dollar in.
Yeah,
Oh, we have to put
whoever
the dollar.
decides to make the motion has to put a dollar amount in.
I'll vote for
Oh,
blank
okay.
and
Okay, that's
Could've been
fine.
later.
Well, that's, yeah, okay, that's fine.
I'll make a motion to approve the approval to authorize the finance team to proceed with
Can you unmute?
0504.
Can't hear.
Oh, Jess, are you muted? Dang, you did so good too.
Darn it! All right, hold on. I have to go back to
Everybody
the
is
side.
speaking mutedly.
I make a motion to approve for approval to authorize the financing team to proceed with $3,805,043 in new money concurrently with the refinancing of the 2016 bonds.
Is there a second?
It's neither one, actually.
It's, well, we said that we had to get under the 10 million, so we went back to option 2B from the previous one, which would get us 9.995 million.
From last week.
Exactly. So it's the green. So it's just under 10 million. Yes. Right.
Second,
Was there a second?
Is there a second on that motion?
second.
Second, yeah. All right, for this, open for discussion now?
So how much is the savings?
Seconded that for, I'm sorry.
Rosemary.
Tell
and
Jack,
Pam.
tell Jack to unmute.
Yes, please.
It's scenario two,
did you?
but it's just under the that amount. Right. So it, because we have to stay under the, right, so we have to stay under the $10 million.
So Bill, how much is the savings, if any, in the budget going forward? Since I don't have the green sheet from last week with me.
No, so we're not doing this yet. We're only doing this. We have to do that next year.
So we're going to save,
We can only do.
if I recall, 124,000.
Yep.
We're going to attribute all of that to next year's budget. But then it increases the following year's budget by how much?
And Jess, you're talking about 2B, the green section, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it says that your
Yes.
total principal would now be 9,995,000 for everything.
Right.
Your savings would be 124,292. Your new money available for projects would be $3,805,043. The first year, Jack, the local effort would be 2.488. The second year, it would jump to 2.935. And then the next year, it would go up to 3.035 and pretty much stay there all the way until the final year.
So the first 3 years were pretty much steady, and then after that, we go up 100,000.
You go, yeah, it's 3.0 something all the remaining years.
3.0.
Year
There's
three
not a tax bill,
onward.
but we get some money for capital.
So there will be a budget impact 3 years from that, but not next year and the year after. Okay, I can live with that.
That's fair.
Otherwise.
No, I remember it. I just don't have it right in front of me. I know what it
I have
says.
two.
Is there any other
I have two
discussion?
if you wanna- There's one. I have two of them for some reason. So there's last week's booklet.
Yeah, I didn't take it with me.
Corey, I have a discussion or a comment when I can,
Yep, please.
okay?
Yep.
All right, for every decision I make on a board, it has a financial ramification. I don't see the need of borrowing this money tonight. I don't see the urgency. I certainly see with the hole that's currently in our budget, we will probably most likely have to borrow something, but we do not have to borrow that tonight. The Federal Reserve has said that they are not going to raise interest rates. And that's the upside. The upside also is that if I would approve this nearly $10 million in additional debt, well, we know where our money's coming from for the next couple of years, and that's a nice upside to have. It's a comfortable feeling to know where your money's coming from.
3.8, right?
The downside of that would be that we also do not know, since everything is speculation, we don't know if we're going to receive money in January, February, March, April from the federal or the state as a bailout or as a stimulus, part of a stimulus. So if I go and approve this tonight, and I vote to approve it, and money shows up in January, February, March, or April, then I've just made a decision that I can't rescind, and I've incurred an unnecessary debt service that I may not possibly need. So I always advise caution, since the decision does not have to be done tonight. So I do see in the future that we may have to borrow, but I don't think we'd have to borrow this much. And I don't
Jack,
think it has to be done tonight. So I would oppose this. Thank you.
Jack, just to clarify, this is not to borrow $10 million in new money.
How much is it, Jessica? Because I didn't hear that part. I heard 9.95 was the last
Right,
number I heard.
That's inclusive of the money that we're refinancing. So the new money would be 3.8 million.
Well, Jessica, that makes me feel a heck of a lot better. But again, do not see the urgency in it tonight. But thank you for making me feel better this evening.
Brian, you had a comment?
Hey, thank you, Corey. Could I just get a little clarification from Bill Hessling? So if we go with this option, which was last week's green option, and I'm comparing the numbers with what we were looking at this week, scenario 2, would this option, if we choose this tonight, permit next year's board to go forward with the additional refunding and new money if we chose to go through with part 2 of scenario 2? So can you compare this, Bill? Explain this option on the table right now with the scenario 2 that we were talking about earlier this evening.
Yeah, they would give them the board would have the ability to if the interest rates are still attractive, to do the second portion of what was the illustrative purposes in scenario 2 to red. It would take another motion of a resolution next year to do it. And then your options probably, like Jack had mentioned, would be then to refinance the 2017 and then also have the option of going up to 10 million again, or even doing larger than that, just like we're considering tonight. So I believe that the answer what you're looking for is yes, that does give the board, but they'd have to do another resolution next year.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
And I think that's the same, even if we went with the red option 2 tonight, it would still be a new resolution next year. We'd be, starting from scratch, new fees and whatnot. They're separate regardless.
Right, and for the visual, last week's green is the first half of this week's red, in a sense.
Correct.
So just so I understand, we're voting on raising the total local effort from what we now have, 2952, to, I'm sorry, 2956 in the next year, to 3.035 in 23. So there's no real change in this year. We know that. Next year, we save the 98,000, but the following years, we go from 2.956 to 3.035. So we're up 8 in 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, the savings are taken in the savings are structured primarily to take them all in next budget year, 21-22.
And Jessica, just so you know, that money that you quoted me now, and I guess that's the one you made the motion on, I don't necessarily disagree with that amount of money. That would be the ballpark that I would think, if all things remain current, that we would be looking to borrow sometime in the spring before the capital improvement projects were to begin. So I necessarily don't disagree with your number that you came up with. I tend to more agree with you than I do disagree. What my disagreement on this is that by making this decision tonight, I commit tonight, which I don't feel is necessary. I feel that's an unnecessary commitment. There's no pressure on me to commit to this tonight when I do not know what's coming down the highway or coming down the pike, as they say, since we're in Pike County, in the early part of next year. I do not know that. So I don't want to make a commitment to this tonight because I don't have to make a commitment to this tonight. And I don't like being boxed in. I like to stay cash fluid, cash liquid. So thank you.
Other discussion? If there's any other discussion? I mean, my opinion, I'll jump in last quick, is, you know, I'm pretty comfortable actually with the 1.3 where we're at in the reserve account currently, at least to fund next year's projects. There's just too many variables right now. You don't know what's coming from the feds. I'm confident the interest rates will stay low, you know, even through 2023. They have to, you know, and they've come out and said that multiple times. So I'm comfortable there. And I'm comfortable knowing that we have other reserve accounts to tap into if a roof needs fixing or something of major concern comes to the district. I agree with Jack Fisher's statements earlier in that the capital improvement list we did receive has a lot of good things in there, not necessarily needed things in there that need to be, or things can be front loaded on that capital improvement list, I feel, for myself at least there. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I just think it's too early, you know, to pull the trigger on this borrowing if it doesn't fix our operating deficit that we'll see in June. So
I just want to reiterate what I said earlier in that I think that this is the best of both options, of all of our options. So our debt service, the amount that we would be paying for our debt service next year with this option would be $447,000, as opposed to if we don't refinance at all, which would be $469,000. So we're actually having a little bit of a savings and getting some money into our, to be able to pay for our capital projects and have some money in the bank for those things should they happen. In addition, some of the items that Dr. Bell referred to earlier, as far as the vans and Chromebooks and technology that we could take out of our general fund and put and pay with our capital reserves, would also then be able to get some of our deficit in our general fund down for this year. So I think that taking some of this money, I'm not comfortable going all the way up to 10 million. Sorry, Jack. But I think that this is the smartest option for the district, is where we are right now. It's no burden to the taxpayer, and in fact will help us with our general fund, and there's no additional cost to them for next year. So
I'm sorry, did you say 450,000? Or did I just?
Yes, the difference between the new local effort and $447,000, the additional.
Okay, so our current local effort for all bonds is now 30,135,000, and we're going to go to 34,575. So it's 4,575,000.
I'm just looking from 21 to 22, the increase for 1 year between the two options.
Okay, so we're going from the new effort would be 2.488131, right?
Yep.
And the current is 2.483824. So that's that $15,000 in savings.
I'm going from the 2.935.
Yeah.
That will be what increases for 22.
Mm-hmm.
From 20, what we would pay in 2021, which would be 2.488. So that's where I got the 4.47.
2.488. Yeah, but we're still going up.
Right, but.
We're going up from 2.488 to 2.935.
Right, but our current existing local effort for that is 2.483 up to 2.952.
But you're comparing 21 to 22. Right. Don't you want to compare 21 to 21? Because according to 21, we're going to go from 2.483 to 2.488. And in 22, we're going to go from 2.952 to 2.935.
So I'm saying, no, that if we did nothing, that's what our increase would already be $409,000.
No, because there's 81,725. That's what the second column is. You see that? I mean, I understand most of it's backloaded.
Right.
Yeah.
Jack, I think what you're saying is if you look at the black column.
I'm going from the black column to the green column.
And you compare 2021, 2022, looking at, if you did nothing, if you didn't vote for refinance.
Right.
What the increase would have been.
Right, you need to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm in charge of unmuting everybody else and I forget myself. Yeah, I think she's looking at if we did absolutely nothing and we didn't refinance, we would be looking at that additional, what were the numbers, Jessica? $400,000 between 2021 and 2022. So she's trying to compare what it would have jumped on the tax burden if we did nothing versus what it will do if we take out the additional 3.8 million.
Because it's almost 450,000, like you're saying. That's a 1 mil increase next year.
Well, let me just clarify one thing. The difference between 21, the top line, and 22, you got to get back to where we saved. If you recall, we did 2 refinancings last year, so that was already built in. So you really got to start looking at 21, 22 if you're going to compare future options, because the increase from 21 to 22 was because going back to normal after taking the savings on the other 2 refinancing last year. You follow me? Okay.
But we're going to have a 1 mil increase, whether we do nothing other than refi, or we go with the green option. We're going to go up 450,000 because we took those savings in the prior year.
Correct. If you call, we put it in budgetary reserve because we wanted to keep the stakeholder for that, knowing that we were going to, I mean, we took the savings, which was the definite right thing to do. We knew it was going to go back to normal. We were, if you recall, I mean, we ended up keeping it in budgetary reserve so that it's kept its stakehold on knowing that that was going to go back up the next year.
I remember the conversation. Okay.
Any other discussion? All right. Jessica, do you want to, can you repeat your, you were so good at it. What was it, 3? I don't have it, yeah.
So this is the motion for the approval to authorize the financing team to proceed with $3,805,043 in new money concurrently with the refinancing of the 2016 bonds.
Thank you, Jess. And if there's no other discussion on that, that already has a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed. All right, hearing 2 objections, the motion carries. Good discussion there, everybody. Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt a resolution calling for the General Assembly to provide critical support and mandate relief benefiting public schools and students by the Board of Directors of the Delaware Valley School District as per the attachment?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I just want to thank Bill for putting a lot of work into those numbers. While we only had to fill in a few blanks, it wasn't easy to come up with those numbers in the blanks. So thanks, Billy.
All those, any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Please note in the minutes that the following policies are under review, listed 1 through 9 below. And we'll move on to other business first from the board. Does any board member have other business to discuss? All right, then do they come? I do have a public comment if my phone doesn't die. And I think this is just to reconsider the hybrid motion as we discussed in the reopening committee. And I believe is, not to quote Dr. Bell, but I'll try, we'll take it week by week at this juncture. More information becomes available every day. The district will keep everything in mind. And I think when he did mention, once we get to considerable substantial in the county transmission rate, there may be things to look at that juncture. Not saying one way or another yet. That kind of sum it up? Stay the course. All right. To the announcements for the meeting schedule. Jack, did you have something? I saw you waving. No?
No.
Okay, sorry, I saw you waving. All right. So to the meeting schedule, December 3rd, 2020, we'll have an organizational meeting at 7 p.m. This organizational meeting will probably, I think, will be held here again. Is
Oh, that was
right?
the other thing.
Or-
If it's okay with you, we'd like to hold it at the boardroom, at the
Okay.
DO.
That's fine.
Traditionally, it's only a 10-minute meeting.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work to break down the cafeteria,
Good job.
auxiliary cafeteria here and reload it. So if you don't mind, certainly we can handle, if a
You good
couple of
with that?
people come, we can handle them. You
Excellent.
know, but that'll save a lot of work for the custodians by not having to come here on the 3rd.
I'm fine with that. Everybody good with that? Good? All right, cool. Great. All right, so that'll be held at the district offices at 7 o'clock on December 3rd. December 10th, 2020, there'll be a work session for the purpose of discussing the school reopening at 6 o'clock in this auditorium. And later that night at 7 o'clock in the auditorium, there will be a regular board meeting held at that time.
Corey,
Yes. Go ahead.
did you say that meeting the 3rd?
The 3rd, December 3rd, correct.
Yeah, I might. I'll let you know.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
The only thing that's newsworthy is winter sports stuff like that. The only thing that's newsworthy is that winter sports just got pushed back 2 weeks.
Good. You're very welcome.
Were there any comments, Corey, from the public? Okay.
No, they were all on Facebook. Pretty weird stuff.